Okay, welcome to part two, close reading, analyzing an argument. We've already done some prompt unlocking. We've read our prompt carefully, circled verbs, underlined important information of what was being asked. We explained the prompt in our own words, and we restated the expectations as a thesis statement. And now we are up to step 5, which is to read the passage closely and take notes that respond to the prompt expectations. So in the previous video, we looked at the background information that explains what the sources are. So we've already begun to become acquainted with the historical context for which these documents are from. And so what we're going to do now is closely read some documents and see how we might be able to use them as evidence to support our answer to the question, whatever that may be. Just a reminder about the Burger style writing. Your thesis statement, your direct answer to the question is the claim, all right? And that is like the top of the burger. Always needs to look good to grab attention and to get people ready to consume the next layers. And the following layers should be warrant statements. That's reason why your direct answer to the question is logical and reasonable. And these statements need to connect the meat of your argument, the data, right? And so the data is the primary sources that we're going to be looking at in this video as we do our close read. Finally, in order to have an effective meal here, you need some bread on the bottom so you don't put your fingers in the meat. Keep it nice and well organized. You have to close out with some significance, either putting it in the historical context or explaining why it's important. That's what the da is for, and that goes at the bottom as you close out your writing. So let's take a look at our procedure here. We know that the prompt is asking us about the Mexican Revolution for Independence, and it's asking us if the American Revolution and the French Revolution had any impact on that conflict. So that's what we're looking for information for. And we're finally getting down to what will be used as evidence to support our argument. Although there could also be information here that we could use for the rationale for our argument too. So just like last time in the close reading, we're going to read one paragraph at a time. And we're going to underline important words that may relate to the prompt. So if it's something that has to do with independence or revolution, Mexico, France, or the United States, we know that that is important. We're going to reread the last paragraph we've just read and highlight any information that may serve as evidence or rationale for or against the thesis, and label it as evidence, rationale, or counterargument. And so with my highlighter, I'm going to give each aspect of this analysis a different color here. So rationale will be blue, counterargument will be green. All right, and we're going to repeat this process until we get down to page 4. And then finally, we're going to turn that into an outline that looks like a hamburger so that we can have a tasty essay. All right. Okay, here is text 1. It is super brief. Just a paragraph. All right, bring that into focus here. My friends and countrymen, neither the king nor tributes exist for us any longer. We have borne this shameful tax, which only suits slaves, for 3 centuries as a sign of tyranny and servitude, a terrible stain which we shall now wash away with our efforts. All right, there's a king in this statement. My friends and countrymen, this indicates the audience. Tributes no longer exist. What is a tribute? We have borne this shameful tax. That could be important. Also that it's shameful, which only suits slaves. So a condition of slavery might be important. 3 centuries as a sign of tyranny and servitude are a terrible stain, which we shall now wash away with our efforts. So we've got stain, wash away. The moment of our freedom has arrived. The hour of our liberty has struck, And if you recognize its great value, you will help me defend it from the ambitious grasp of the tyrants. All right, so tyrants are coming up more than once here. Only a few hours remain before you see me at the head of the men who take pride in being free. I invite you to fulfill this obligation. All right, so he seems to think that they are obligated to take some sort of action. And if we look up here, we can see that Text 1, Mexican Independence, this relates to Mexico. It's a speech by Father Hidalgo. Grito de Dolores, I think, is the name or the title of the speech. All right. So, how could this be used as evidence? So, if we are trying to prove that there is a connection, this is going to be useful for evidence because we will know what is it that motivates the Mexican independence war. All right. So, it could be have something to do with taxes, could have something to do with slavery, could have something to do with freedom, right? Which is being abridged by tyranny, right? We mentioned tyrants twice. Liberty is important. It has great value for those who recognize it. And only a few hours remain before you see me at the head of men who take pride in being free. So, men who take pride in being free will fulfill their obligation. This sounds like it is a call to arms of some sort. I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to use this yet. So we have to come back and think about it after we take a look at the other documents. All right. Text 2. Text 2 is from the American Revolution. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under a absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such a government. All right, so we've got duty, abuses, usurpations. What does that mean? Evinces. Wow. Only on the SAT would I ever see that word. A design to reduce them under absolute despotism. I think that was covered in government. Absolute despotism. That might be a type of despotism, whatever that is. We need to figure it off. It is their right, their duty to throw off such a government, which is a context clue for despotism. So maybe absolute despotism is a type of government. And to provide new guards for their future security, such as being the patient sufferance of these colonies, such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. Is necessary to alter former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations that shows up twice. What does it mean? All having in their direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny. So we got a connection between absolute despotism and absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let's the facts be submitted to a candid world. All right, to prove this. So it looks like what we're looking at here, the Declaration of Independence, is actually some sort of like indictment or an appeal of some sort. All right. And of course, you've got the word independence, right? And we know that it's from the American Revolution. All of this looks like it could be evidence of some sort or rationale. I'm going to highlight absolute tyranny, right? Because in the other source, there is the mention twice of tyranny. I don't see the word freedom in this paragraph. I don't see anything about slavery in this paragraph. I don't see anything about taxes in this paragraph. So I'm not sure if this is strongly aligned or what, but we'll just have to keep reading. Okay. Partial list of grievances. He has refused to his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. All right, so not making laws. He has forbidden his governors, refused to assent to laws. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance unless suspended in their operation till his assent be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend them. Okay. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. Wow, okay. That is super wordy. Called together legislative bodies in unusual places, distant from public record, for the purpose of fatiguing them into compliance. Okay, with his measures. He has dissolved the House of Representatives repeatedly for opposing his manly firmness, his invasions of the rights of the people. All right, so we got rights of the people, and dissolving the House of Representatives, or representative houses. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws, for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices. Judges are dependent on his will for their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries, right? So certainly they're going to have a bias there. None of that so far relates to what we've read in the other source. So I think that what I'm going to do is circle all this as possible counter argument, right? Because this runs against the idea that the American Revolution has something to do with the Mexican Revolution. All right. Next page. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislators. So we've got time of peace standing armies without consent. Quartering for large bodies of armed troops. Protecting them by mock trial. Protecting them from punishment for any of the murders for which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states. Wow, that's pretty serious. For cutting off trade with all parts of the world, imposing taxes without consent, depriving people benefits of trial by jury, transporting us beyond the seas to be tried by pretend offenses. He has excited domestic insurrections against us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers domestic insurrections amongst us, inhabitants of our frontiers, merciless Indian savages whose rule of warfare is an undistinguishing destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for the redress in most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only with repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act may be defined a tyrant. Oppression. Okay. Our petitions have been answered with injury. They're unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Okay. So, in terms of evidence that there is a connection, it wouldn't work with anything here except maybe tyranny, freedom, and taxes, right? Because they're talking about taxes in the source from Father Hidalgo. All these other complaints here, this stuff is not part of what was going on with the Mexican Revolution. There is some sort of connection actually for Um, he makes mentions of Indians, calls them savages, which, of course, is not very nice. Um, but there was a connection in the prior knowledge. There was something there about how in one of the revolutionary movements they did not want to bring in people who are Native Americans into the revolutionary movement. So that might have some sort of connection with the Mexican Revolution. Okay. Now we've got a new source, 1789 Declaration, Rights of the Citizen of Man. Um, it doesn't say where it comes from, interestingly, but your history teacher is not afraid to tell you that this is a document about the French Revolution. All right. Men are born and remain free and equal in rights. Social distinctions may be founded upon the general good. All right. Men are born free, equal rights. Social distinctions may be founded only on the general good. Uh, the aim of all political association is the preservation of the natural and imprescriptible rights of man. Okay. Political association, preservation of rights. These rights are liberty, property, security, and resistance to oppression. Law is the expression of the general will. Every citizen has a right to participate personally or through his representative in its foundation. It must be the same for all, whether it protects or punishes. All citizens, being equal in the eyes of the law, are equally eligible to all dignities and all public positions and occupations, according to their abilities, without distinction, except for that of their virtues and talents. Okay. No one shall be disquieted on account of his opinions, including his religious views, provided their manifestation does not disturb the public order or establishment by law. No one shall be disquieted. I wonder what that means. No one shall be disquieted. Let's underline that. On account of positions, including religious views, as long as they do not disturb the public order. Okay. The security of the rights of man and the citizen requires public military forces. Security requires public military forces. These forces are therefore established for the good of all and are not for the personal advantage of those whom they shall be entrusted. Okay, not for personal advantage. All the citizens have the right to decide, either personally or by their representatives, as to the necessity of the public contribution, to grant this freely, to know what uses it is, and to put and to fix the proportion, the mode of assessment and collection, and the duration of taxes. All right. All citizens decide the necessity of the public contribution, the proportion, how it's assessed, and the collection duration of taxes. Society has a right to require of every public agent an account of his administration. Public account. Since property is an inviolable and sacred right, no one shall be deprived thereof where public necessity legally determined shall not demand. Okay, property is an inviolable sacred right. Okay. Except for public necessity. All right. Now let's see. Let's go back. We're looking for tyranny. We are looking for taxes. This has to do with taxes. Okay. Security, religion, equality before the law, liberty. You know what? Liberty was in that prompt. Is the word freedom anyone here? Freedom, freedom, freedom. Men are born free and remain equal in rights. Okay. All right. So the stuff that I've underlined so far tells me that this stuff is potential evidence to show that there is a connection between the motivations of Mexican independence and that of the French movement for independence. And all of this other stuff is potential counter argument for how they are not the same. So if you had a thesis that there was no connection, you might be able to use that. All right, it's entirely up to you. All right. And that is just some extra paper there. All right, so this concludes part 2 of close reading. You are going to go back now to the previous page where we had that argument there from Father Hidalgo and do an outline in the burger format right here. All right. So, what is your answer to the question? What is your reason for an answer to the question? What sort of data can you use from one of the documents to support this reason why your answer is correct? What sort of second rationale would be an answer to this question? What is the evidence that this rationale is correct as a second possible reason that your answer is correct? And finally, close out why is any of it important? Talk about historical context, make comparisons between these revolutions and maybe other revolutions, maybe ones that were in part of that previous knowledge, but you don't actually have specific sources for, or explain how it affects things today. Close reading.